So welcome to CEC's first webinar for the year. This is part of a webinar series focusing on climate. Those of you who know us know that we are a 50-year-old nonprofit environmental group based in Santa Barbara that serves Ventura, Santa Barbara County, and San Luis Obispo counties, and that we were recognized last year as a 2020 Nonprofit of the Year by the state of California. Our mission is to advance rapid and equitable solutions to the climate crisis. Naira, did you want to say something?
I'm going to jump in with a quick interpretation announcement so we can get settled in and listen to what you're sharing in both languages. Voy a comenzar con un anuncio de interpretación para que podamos conectarnos en ambos idiomas. Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Naira Pacheco. Yo seré la intérprete de inglés al español para esta tarde. Hello, everyone. My name is Naira Pacheco, and I will be the interpreter today for English and Spanish. CEC has a strong commitment to creating multilingual language justice spaces so that more of our community can engage. For this reason, this meeting will be interpreted simultaneously in English and Spanish. So please listen and participate in the language you are most comfortable. El Consejo Comunitario del Medio Ambiente mantiene un compromiso fuerte a la creación de espacios de justicia de lenguaje para que más de nuestra comunidad pueda participar. Por este motivo, esta reunión será interpretada simultáneamente en inglés y español, así que a favor de escuchar y hablar en el idioma que se sienta más cómodo. The PowerPoint presentation will be available in both languages. La presentación de diapositivas está disponible en ambos idiomas. En unos minutos, cuando termine de dar las instrucciones, activaremos la función de interpretación. Si usted está en su computadora, verá aparecer un icono de globo al fondo y a la derecha de su pantalla. Y si está en su teléfono, verá 3 puntitos en la parte de abajo. Haga clic aquí y haga clic en interpretación de idiomas y seleccione el idioma en el que quiere escuchar. Si por algún motivo el audio original suena más fuerte que la voz del intérprete, en cualquier momento puede silenciar el audio original. In just a minute, after I finish giving these instructions, we will activate the interpretation feature. If you are on a computer, you will see a globe pop up on the bottom of the screen. If you are on your phone, you will see 3 dots on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. Click on these and select the language you speak. If for some reason the original speaker sounds louder than the interpreter you are listening to, you can mute the original audio at any moment. Usted tendrá que seleccionar un canal de idioma si no es bilingüe en español y en inglés. You will have to select a language channel if you are not bilingual in English and Spanish. We welcome contributions into the Q&A section in both languages. Damos la bienvenida a participación en la sección de preguntas y respuestas en ambos idiomas. And finally, we create these spaces with everyone's support. So please communicate any issues by chat. Y por último, creamos estos espacios con el apoyo de todos. Favor de comunicar cualquier problema en el chat. Thank you. We may now activate the interpretation feature. Gracias. Podemos activar la función de interpretación.
Great. Thank you, Naira. All right. So on the bottom of your screen, if you would like to enact the feature, you'll see a little globe that says interpretation. Very good. And if you have any issues, just post them in the chat, please. And Iris and team will take care of it. Thank you again, Naira. All right, I want to let everybody know we're really happy to be here today with you. This webinar is being recorded. You will receive a link to the recording and other resources after the event. And also all of these resources will be made available at CECSB.org. So if you're registered for this, you should get a follow-up email, but you can also find the resources on our website. This is an active session and your engagement is welcome. We invite you to ask questions and in the Q&A during the presentations or after the presentation, we'll answer them as we are able. We apologize in advance if we're not able to respond to every question. We'll do our best. Please use the chat for any other comments you may have or resources you want to share. We have a full support team here to help us, including Iris, who you'll see as one of the panelists, Alan and Katie. And then It's a little bit past noon right now, so we should be wrapping up around 1 o'clock. Okay. All right, great. So we are going to begin. And I have the first piece, actually. So I want to just talk a bit about why. I want to start by sharing, why we're here. And before we get into CEC's solutions around climate change, I think it's really important that we just kind of set the stage. And anyone working in this field just knows some basic facts. The first is that there has been a 350% increase in extreme weather catastrophes in the last 40 years. Or to give a more nuanced perspective, since 1980, the US has averaged 6 events a year that have topped over $1 billion in damages. And in the last 5 years, the annual average is closer to 12 events. So about double in just in the last few years. So it doesn't just feel like things are getting more intense, they are getting more intense. And this is why CEC does this work. Next slide, please. This isn't just about data points. At this point, each one of us has a very personal climate story, whether it be extreme heat or wildfires or the rain bomb that led to the Montecito debris flow. Personally, even as a climate activist, for a long time, I considered some of these things, wildfire and heat, for example, just to be things that we lived with in Southern California, like earthquakes. But over the last 5 years, I've had my property, my family's property, or even my life threatened multiple times by dozens of fires, over a dozen fires. And in fact, I was staying out at Mount Calvary the night that the Tea Fire erupted and burned Mount Calvary to the ground. Even with those experiences, I do want to share a personal story that over the summer, last summer, I had an experience with. I was spending a few weeks in Oregon, visiting quietly with some family, and I had to quickly flee 2 rapidly approaching fires that exploded due to hurricane force winds. They were coming at me from both directions. It ended up taking me over 2 days to wind my way back through California to get home to Santa Barbara by making a giant figure 8. Basically out to the ocean and back and out to the ocean and back, crisscrossing mountains with roads and highways that were frequently shedding in front of me or right behind me. And for 2 days, I lived in a respirator and didn't see the sun. The smoke was so dark that there were points where I could hear crickets chirping at noon. And it was the first time that I experienced a feeling of nowhere being safe. And I recall during this time period having a conversation with CEC board member Pat McElroy, who's the former fire chief for the city of Santa Barbara, in which I could just hear the horror in his voice as he talked about how emergency responders were now measuring the advancement of fires in acres per second. And here's how he put it. He said the Thomas Fire became the largest fire in California history in 2018. 2.5 years later, it is the 7th. 7 of the 10 largest fires in California history occurred in August and September of last year. So that is the kind of impetus and the personal story behind the data and why we do the work that we do to put California on track for an equitable, climate-safe future by 2030. Today, we're going to be talking about that CEC's mission to reverse, repair, and recover. And we're going to talk about how this is really the moment where we have to lean in. Many of you have been hearing me say this for years, that we have this narrow window of time and that window is closing, and that we're really globally in the position now where we have to do twice as much, twice as fast. We have a little over a decade to get to net zero to avoid the worst case scenarios. And I'll remind you that it took us a decade just to get the first wind farm in Santa Barbara County. So this is a major lift. And but there are 3 things that give me hope, and I'm going to run through those really, really quickly. The first is that we know what we need to do. We know why the carbon cycle is disrupted, and we know what needs to happen to repair it. So essentially, it's science, but it's not rocket science. Next slide, please. So here's what I mean. The crux of the problem is that we're emitting too many greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane, et cetera. This graph puts all the different types of greenhouse gases into a carbon dioxide equivalent, measuring it in million metric tons. You don't have to know all of the the data here, but you'll get the gist of it. On the left, you'll see what's contributing to those emissions by sector in today's world. And on the right, you'll see what we need to do as quickly as possible. So basically crushing most of those emissions in the next decade. So ag and forestry, commercial and residential, electricity, industrial, transportation. Then what you'll see, and that will include moving electricity emissions to 100% renewables as soon as possible. Reducing transportation emissions by 80%, ag emissions by 80%. And then you'll see that gray bar that what we need to do is sequester a bunch of emissions, almost 100 million metric tons. So to recap, every sector needs to be massively disrupted and every sector needs to pull off really heroic levels of drawdown. The second thing, next slide, please, that gives me hope is that we finally have the wind at our backs. And I know that many of you feel this as well. While President Biden's climate plan isn't perfect, the federal government is finally sending the right policy signals. So I'm going to just run through some of the highlights of Biden's plan, just picking up some of the kind of top notes of it, so we're all grounded in the same information. The first is that he has declared a climate emergency and he's declared climate as a national security priority. The second thing is he's called for an end to fossil fuels and a national transition to clean electricity by 2035, as well as a transition of the federal fleet to electric vehicles. He's also called for the protection of 30% of land and coastal waters by 2030. We're still waiting to hear what exactly that means. And he took a page from California's development of a new program last year of the Civilian Climate Corps, and he's recommending a similar federal effort. And we'll post a link to that California Climate Action Corps in the chat. However, even with global agreements or Biden's platforms, it's important to note that the majority of the actual work on climate will happen at the local level. And that's the third thing that gives me hope. It's the massive amount of creativity, energy, and commitment that emerged at the state and local level in the last few years. So while we have a lot of work to do together, there's some incredible momentum happening up and down the Central Coast. And I'm going to hand it to CEC's Director of Energy and Climate Programs, Michael Chiakos, to talk about the first of CEC's three-pronged strategy for the next decade, Reverse. Michael?
Thank you, Sigrid. My name is Michael Chiakos. I'm CEC's Director of Energy and Climate Programs. And the Central Coast in California can help lead the world to zero carbon. My wife and I are expecting our first baby in May, and it is possible that by the time she reaches adulthood, we could be living in this zero carbon world. So imagine with me this future: 100% clean electricity, zero emission vehicles and cities easy to get around without a car, buildings that don't use fossil fuels, and a zero waste circular economy. So this is the big idea, and CEC is working with a network of partners under the leadership of the Climate Center to possibly pull forward California's goal of carbon neutrality by 2045. Could California get to carbon neutrality by 2030, matching Norway's ambitious goal? The quicker we get there, the greater chance we have of avoiding climate disasters that are becoming increasingly severe and commonplace. Much climate action is locally implemented, and we will push agencies across the three-county region to adopt zero carbon targets by 2035 or earlier. This will ensure that local communities are taking strong actions, developing innovative, equitable, replicable programs, and proving that California can reach bolder goals. We've already made significant strides on 100% renewable electricity. Our region is a national leader on zero emission vehicles, Local governments are getting fossil fuels out of new buildings, and our communities are cutting food and plastic waste. Our 5-year strategic plan seeks to significantly ramp up efforts to get to zero carbon, accelerate our work to sequester carbon in our working and natural lands, and develop climate resiliency by preparing for the climate impacts that are intensifying. Next. CEC, the Central Coast in California, are leading our nation and world towards this future. We experiment and innovate here in California, creating the clean energy economy of the future. What we do here is spreading to other states and regions. One example, the cities of Santa Barbara and Goleta were early adopters of 100% renewable electricity goals. In 5 Ventura cities were some of the first in the nation to achieve 100% renewable electricity. Now, over 170 cities in 8 states have made similar actions, and President Biden recently set a goal of 100% carbon-free power for the entire nation by 2035. Next. So here's how we'll do it. We already have 2 pioneering cities, San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara. They have set some of the most ambitious goals in the entire country of carbon neutrality by 2035. Now we need to work on the others in entities like school districts and transit districts. We seek to influence county and city governments in Santa Barbara, Ventura, and SLO counties to set and take action towards ambitious, equitable goals in their climate action plans, general plans, transportation plans, hazard mitigation plans, and other critical policy documents to halt carbon emissions, draw down excess carbon, and build that community resilience. We are also launching a climate leadership program to build a troupe of diverse climate activists that can engage in policy advocacy and build community support for action throughout the 3 counties, including youth, people of color, and other underrepresented communities. Next. So what gives us this confidence that we can reach these ambitious targets? It's because we have a strong track record. We have the technology, and we are building the will to make it happen. Here's one success story that is accelerating our clean future. In 2007, CEC wrote our energy blueprint, which was one of the first carbon neutral plans in the entire country. We called community choice the closest thing to a silver bullet for quick decarbonization. Over the last decade, 23 of these local energy agencies have formed, serving over 11 million Californians. They're the easiest and quickest way for our region to move to 100% clean energy, while funding programs to help our region decarbonize at scale. In 2018, Ventura, Thousand Oaks, Oxnard, Ojai, and the County of Ventura became some of the first communities in the nation to be powered by 100% renewable electricity after they joined Clean Power Alliance, along with many other cities in Ventura and LA counties. In 2020, Central Coast Community Energy started expanding to San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara counties and now serves most of our region. They have set a goal of 100% renewable electricity by 2030 through long-term power contracts with newly constructed renewables and storage. Both agencies are quickly developing programs to get more electric vehicles on our road, develop solar microgrids, get fossil fuels out of our buildings, and more to help our region decarbonize. CEC and our network are continuing to advocate, engage, and help these new agencies as they develop ambitious goals and programming. Next. So what makes CEC unique is that we work on many levels. We advocate for policy drivers, then we build the networks, and we pilot on-the-ground action and bring them to scale. Let's take one example with electric vehicles. We advocate for California to set strong EV policy and for agencies such as the County of Santa Barbara to commit to only purchasing EVs in their fleet. And this year, the county is buying 56 EVs and installing 87 chargers. CEC and Sierra Club worked with Santa Barbara MTD to set a goal of 100% electric buses by 2030. This is one of the most ambitious goals in the nation. We've helped Ventura schools receive funding for electric school buses, and we'll continue to help local agencies deploy all electric buses, develop electric car share, van pool, or other on-demand transportation. CEC also led development of Electric Drive 805. You can see the website here. I hope you'll visit it. This is a coalition of CEC, the air districts of Ventura, Santa Barbara, and SLO, and governments, businesses, and other partners that have been working for a decade to make it easier for this transition to take place. And then we do the on-the-ground work, get more charging stations built, and ensure that low-income drivers know about special rebates that make EVs more affordable. So we now have over 1,800 public charging stations and almost 20,000 plug-in vehicles in our 3 counties. Californians built the EV market, and Governor Newsom recently set an executive order of 100% zero-emission vehicle sales by 2035. Massachusetts just set a similar goal as our other states, and as is President Biden. Next. For renewable energy, our tangible actions are proving how we can achieve bold policy goals. We worked with the cities of Santa Barbara and Goleta to set 100% renewable energy goals, and community choice is quickly making these goals reality across our entire region. The Strauss Wind Farm in Lompoc, which CEC advocated for, will double renewable electricity production in Santa Barbara County with 1 project. Our solarized residential program has directly helped 858 homeowners go solar while boosting the Central Coast solar market. We are now working to expand our solarized nonprofit program with the goal of installing 1 megawatt of solar on regional nonprofits. And thanks to the advocacy of CEC's staff and board, Santa Barbara Unified School District just approved a plan to solarize 14 schools, including 6 solar microgrids. Another success story, next. CEC built the Santa Barbara County Food Rescue, a collaborative food recovery network of private, public, and nonprofit sectors, preventing produce and restaurant quality food from going to the landfill and turning into methane. Instead, we are getting this food to those facing hunger throughout the county. Over 100 tons of food has been rescued and provided to seniors, vets, and people in need. We're currently scaling up with the aim of activating more community kitchens and streamlining production to lower the cost of meals. Next. CEC's Ditch Plastic program has successfully advocated for 7 regional laws that limit distribution of millions of single-use plastic items per year. We continue to push for policies that reduce single-use plastics at the source and are also advocating for a shift to a circular economy that designs waste out of the system. Now I'm going to pass the baton to Allegra, who will talk about how we can draw down the excess carbon emissions.
I think you can turn on my video. Let's see. If not, I can just start talking here. So thanks, Michael. Oh, there we go. Thanks, Michael. My name is Allegra Roth. I'm CEC's Food and Climate Program Manager. So by now, we know that eliminating carbon emissions isn't going to be enough to achieve our climate goals and climate safety. We need to actively draw down carbon from the atmosphere and rapidly scale nature-based solutions to achieve not just carbon neutrality, but to get to carbon negative. So this is our decade. This is the decade. Our challenge is to remove tremendous amounts of carbon from the atmosphere, carbon that has been released over the last century, and store it in our plants and the roots and the soil beneath our feet. And the best way to do that is to support what plants and soil have been doing for free through photosynthesis for billions of years. So we need to do this by adapting the way we manage our land. Next slide. There are dozens of strategies we have at our disposal, from compost application on rangeland to changing our methods of tilling, to planting trees along the edges of fields. There's a lot we can do and a lot of carbon that we can draw down. As an example, a few years ago, CEC found that we could offset all of the emissions from our county's agricultural sector simply by applying compost on just 15% of our county's rangeland. Compost won't be the only strategy CEC pushes for by any means, but just shows that the climate impacts are real and they are doable. So over the next year, CEC is going to do everything we can to rapidly scale nature-based carbon negative solutions and set bold goals for nature-based carbon sequestration, both at a local level and a statewide level. This is our big idea. And to do this, CEC will do what we do best, piloting climate smart strategies and building coalitions of people to scale those solutions. So next slide. Compost on rangeland has gotten a lot of attention over the last few years for its potential, and we'll continue to study the impacts of compost, but we will also be looking to pilot and research other strategies. So those could include cover cropping, tree planting, agroforestry, things along those lines. Luckily, the state of California has an entire grant program dedicated to doing just this, the Healthy Soils program. And there's dedicated funding in this program to study and implement healthy soils practices on California farms and ranches. So we luckily continue to see more and more investment in this program, and it's great to have meaningful financial support from the state. And at CEC, we'll keep promoting this program. It provides a great opportunity for us to partner with farmers, develop research projects, and actually pay growers to do this work, which is hugely important. Next slide. In order to increase the use of compost specifically, like I was mentioning, we need to push for alternative composting technologies, including the use, including the use of small-scale compost, small-scale community-based and decentralized composting systems. So the more that we can keep food waste and organic materials in our local community where it comes from, we won't have to transport our food waste dozens or hundreds of miles away. We can avoid unnecessary emissions from the landfilling and transportation of that food waste and keep it in our community. And in the end, food waste at its core is just nutrients and water and carbon, all of which we need in our soils. So we'll be finding innovative ways to keep these materials on our farms, on our ranches, in our community and school gardens that can really benefit from the food waste when it's managed properly. Next slide. So there are major institutional shifts that we need to significantly scale carbon smart farming, specifically when it comes to farmer and rancher incentives. We have found that there are various policy barriers to this work at the regional level, and we need to address those barriers and the lack of policy incentives at the regional scale. So that includes working with county departments, our regional water boards, our planning agencies, and helping translate those solutions into incentives at the state level. So a piece of the farmer incentives has to be financial. So we're looking at new financing mechanisms as well, like carbon markets or ecosystem service markets. And this is something that the Biden administration has shown a lot of interest in. So we'll hopefully be seeing some leadership at the national level, specifically around the carbon market. The goal here is to make it financially feasible and financially beneficial for farmers in our region to adopt soil health strategies. We can't do this work without the people on the ground managing our land, farmers and ranchers planting seeds and tilling fields every day. So we will definitely continue centering the priorities of growers as we push for these incentives. Next slide. None of this work, especially the research and policy work, can be done without our partnerships. A priority for CEC has been and will continue to be building strong coalitions of researchers and technical advisors, farmers, and policy advocates to really take a multi-sector approach to this work. We've built a really vibrant and exciting network of partners with statewide organizations and legislators, and there's huge opportunity to translate what we've done on the Central Coast to the state level, and the folks at the state are keeping an eye on us to see what we do and what we come up with. And as you can imagine, changing the carbon stock in our soils to the degree that we need to requires buy-in from people at every scale, from growers all the way up to statewide lawmakers. And CEC is well positioned to build and maintain the coalition of folks that need to be at the table. Last slide. So to wrap it up, when CEC first started doing this work a few years ago, very few people were talking about carbon sequestration and soil health. Since then, we've gotten more and more confident about the power of this work. Soils have been on the front of the New York Times Magazine. Hollywood celebrities have gotten on board. At the local level, the County of Santa Barbara has chosen to include natural and working lands in their climate action plan. The County of Ventura has actually included specific carbon farming language in their general plan, which is the guiding document for land use in the county. So there's a lot of momentum and energy in this work. And it's been great doing this work on the ground, launching pilots, hosting events, and advancing policy, and actually seeing the movement grow around us and being part of that growth. So CEC's made big waves in this work in the last few years, and there's still a lot of work to do, and we're excited to share our steps along the way. So I think that's it for me, and I'll hand it to Sharon Main, the director of CEC's Climate Resilience Program.
Great, thank you, Allegra. My name is Sharon Main. As Allegra said, I'm the director of Climate Resilience at CEC. And, you know, climate impacts are here. We're all feeling them. And even with aggressive efforts to reverse and repair, as we just heard from Allegra and Michael, it's not going to be enough to protect us from the threats of climate change that are already here. We're not even likely to see some of the peaks of some of these climate impacts, such as sea level rise or extreme heat, and even intense fires for maybe another 30 to 50 years. So what this means is that we're going to be dealing with climate impacts for at least the rest of our lifetimes, and likely our children's lifetimes as well. That's why we must also spur bold action to protect our community, particularly those most vulnerable from the impacts of climate change. Next slide. We're seeing fires like never before. In 2020, California doubled its previous fire record with over 4 million acres burned. Sigrid gave us a very harrowing experience, her own experience, but we've all had them. When you think about fires that then fuse together and they last, like happened last year in the August complex fire, California experienced our first ever gigafire. That's 1 million acres or more. So wildfire experts have actually started to expand the definition of these massive blazes, whether they're megafires or gigafires, and it's beyond just acres burned to mean the wildfires that have really an unusually large impact on people and the environment. Also, heat records continue to be shattered across the globe, and we are once again heading into another drought year here regionally, with a prediction of about half of the normal rainfall for the region. Next slide. And even though we live on the coast, many of us are really not paying much attention to sea level rise. And while this particular climate threat may seem like something far off into the future, it's not going to be, it's actually going to be quite devastating to us, both socially and economically. I mean, it's already impacting roads and infrastructure and limiting access to certain beaches. And it's been noted by the USGS, the US Geologic Survey, that over 600,000 people and $200 billion in property will be at risk in California over the coming decades. And these impacts are likely to be far more costly and impactful to society than even the worst wildfires and earthquakes in our state's history, by, they say, a factor of 10. So you can imagine this is a really, really important issue. Next slide. And while climate really is affecting all of us, whether it be fire or drought or extreme heat or sea level rise or even unpredictable storms, the impacts of climate are borne disproportionately by those most vulnerable, those being low-income communities, our frontline workers, marginalized populations, communities of color, homeless, elderly, the young, and even those with underlying health conditions. And when climate impacts and disasters are combined with, say, a pandemic, which we've all been experiencing, prolonged recession, and then even racial violence and intolerance, The burden is not only disproportionate, cruel, and unfair, but it's devastating to our community cohesion and social well-being. Next slide. With bold actions to prepare and protect people and places, we can tackle the climate emergency and its human costs and safeguard your children and grandchildren's future, as well as lift up those most vulnerable. Building a just and equitable climate resilience is going to require integrating a range of strategies and connecting the dots from public health, land use planning, infrastructure protection, disaster preparedness, to the neighborhood level engagement and empowerment, which is really key. Creating resilience to the climate changes really demands new approaches that empowers community and gives voice to indigenous knowledge and address we're facing. So how does this happen? Next slide. CEC will push agencies to set even far more ambitious, equitable, and resilience goals. We have great partners, and the cities here in our county are doing great work, but we really must go further. We have to protect against the future risks, both the near and long term, and we have to engage diverse voices in this process. Equity and justice need to be centered in climate resilience, and this includes challenging the systemic racism and barriers that still persist. Our communities of color, our low income and frontline workers should not suffer a greater burden of the climate change. And government agencies and community partners need to incorporate the resilience measures into their current work plans. We're in a climate emergency and the impacts, they're happening now. So we're going to do this in a couple of different ways. Next slide. Many of you here have participated in our climate resilience roundtables. Over the last year, we've been listening and learning from the community through this series of roundtables. We brought together government agencies, climate and disaster planners, community leaders from public health and social justice and environmental sectors. These roundtables resulted in over 700 community-generated ideas and solutions to promote climate resilience. And we'll be sharing all of these ideas and unpacking the key themes that we learned from the roundtables in a webinar that we're hosting next week, next Friday, the 12th. And I think we're going to put that in the chat for you because I'd love to have you participate. Next slide, please. Here are just a few examples of some of the top ideas that were generated from the Resilience Roundtable series that we'll be exploring. And these ideas are ranging from more inclusive planning, which I've really alluded to climate resilience hubs, to transportation and structure protection. And we'll have all of these in both English and Spanish for our event next week. So our plan will be to continue to promote these community-generated ideas and solutions through CEC's Climate Resilience Priorities Snapshot. And this will be a report that will really, that will be informed by our most critical thinking and what's happening in the community, the on the ground conditions. So we'll be looking at what's happening now, what you need to focus on, what are the most immediate threats, and what has the most community energy around it. We'll be looking at what is the community really calling for, and I think access and inclusion is one of those examples. And what needs to be elevated, what's really not being addressed. And I think about things such as really the connections between public health and some of these climate impacts. So this snapshot report will not only inform our work, but we hope that it will encourage others to adopt these key elements in their planning efforts going forward. And it will help give the public sort of a real-time issues that are before us that we need to be considering. Next slide. We'll also be working closely with our partners at the Central Coast Climate Justice Network and create really a policy action platform based on the principles and the ideals that have emerged through the Climate Resilience Roundtables. And this will really help elevate key climate justice policy recommendations and help strengthen the equity and justice lens at the local, regional, and state level. It will remind governments and agencies to incorporate these perspectives of the Spanish and indigenous language first communities and the frontline and essential workers and communities of color as they set their climate goals and actions. And it will help make a case for more capacity support and decision-making power to empower our communities so that they can actually have greater input and control on their own resilience. Next slide. And finally, we will look for partnership opportunities to develop climate protection measures that really connect the dots with public health issues, such as the need for urban cooling and clean air centers during smoke events and fire events. And I want to point out that the World Health Organization has recently suggested that governments really work on an all hazards approach to preparedness, from infectious disease outbreaks to extreme weather events and even climate change. And this to me also includes an all people approach. We need to work at these intersections of health, the environment, and the economy to really achieve true resilience. Next slide. And as has been mentioned really throughout our presentation, the networks and collaborations and partnerships are really key to an integrated approach to climate resilience. And CEC does have strength in this area. We brought together networks and community partnerships between government and nonprofits and activist groups and academia and much more. We serve as both a convener and a leader, helping to push policy and cutting edge ideas. Just a really quick few examples. We co-founded and co-chair the Central Coast Climate Justice Network along with CAUSE, which has now been around for about 3 years. And this is where we have over 16 social justice environmental organizations that are currently working together, along with our affiliate members from government agencies. And as mentioned earlier, through our food program and the Santa Barbara County Food Action Network, there are over 30 partner agencies that we're working with, including health organizations, education institutions. And these are really important partners going forward because strengthening the social safety net is really critical to providing core elements of a just community resilience. And we are actively sharing and leveraging our actions with multiple climate collaboratives that are up and down the state, from the locals, the Santa Barbara County Climate Collaborative, to our Central Coast Climate Justice Network, as I mentioned, our Central Coast Climate Collaborative, which is from Monterey to Ventura County, and even ARCA, which is a statewide collaboration of regional collaboratives and networks. So really an important component and part of our strategy. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Sigrid.
Great, I'm back. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Michael, for talking about what we need to do to reverse emissions. Allegra to talk about what we need to do to actually work with nature to repair our broken carbon cycle, and Sharon for talking about how we protect against the increasing climate threats that we are facing. I'm going to just talk very briefly about how we will be measuring and tracking progress over the next few years. So each of our programs has set goals for the next 5 years, and over the next couple of months, we'll be building out a dashboard to monitor our progress and assess where we're at in tracking and meeting our goals. What I'm showing you here is a dashboard just specifically for community engagement, the type of thing that that we can easily track right now as we work to build a troop of climate activists of youth and adults, which is a really significant portion of our effort. This no longer is a work that can be done by 1 or 2 organizations. It's work that has to be done by all of us. And we're designing programs and efforts to engage you all. And I know there are a few questions about what that might look like. So I'm going to take a moment here to transition us into the Q&A. And so there is a Q&A section at the that you can type in your questions. We've been answering some of them in writing, so you can see those in the answered section, and then we'll be addressing a few of those in live right here. I'm actually going to ask Michael Chiakos to take there was a question earlier. It looks like it may have gotten dismissed, or about how folks can engage in the policy work? I'm not actually sure what happened to that question.
Yeah, I can answer that.
Okay, and could you repeat the question too, please?
I don't have it on my list, but yes, it was about how can everyday citizens engage in climate activism.
Mhm.
And one of the easiest ways to make sure that you're staying up to date is to sign up to get our action alerts and to follow the communications that CEC puts out. There's definitely a lot of hot opportunities right now. The county of Santa Barbara, the city of Santa Barbara, some of the cities in Ventura County are developing or doing their second climate action plans. And there's ample opportunity to participate in that. The city of Santa Barbara is also moving forward a building electrification reach code to get natural gas out of new construction. That's active right now. So if you sign up for our action alerts, you'll be able to learn how to send in emails or letters, attend different meetings, and be able to participate. If you're interested, please let us know also. We're putting together a more formal program that will help to really build this diverse troupe of climate activists from different walks of life. And we can definitely help you get into that more formal climate activist program as well as we develop it.
Excellent. Sharon, you may just want to repeat the invitation to the webinar here in the next week or so. That's really about community engagement in developing solutions.
Right. So the wrap up, we're calling it the WrapUp Climate Resilience Roundtable. It really is the culmination of our 15 months worth of work. And so that event is next Friday, March 12th, and it'll be at 10 a.m. And it's a webinar that will really allow us to take all of that information, all of these generated ideas, but really wrap it up into how we're going to progress forward. And from that, we really want to continue to engage people in the ideas, because they're some of them are very simple ideas, and some of them are much more policy-oriented ideas. But the idea is that these are ideas. These are the issues that the community has elevated to the top of this process. And so I'd be really excited for you to come participate in that. And then for those that can sign up, we have a limited number, but we'll have an opportunity for an afternoon session that same day to take a deeper dive, to talk about how we could then collaboratively maybe take some of those top ideas and actually start working towards implementation, start working toward alignment with some of the state and federal resources that are coming down the pipe, and how we could actually start to get ahead of it so that we're ready when those dollars are coming into our community. So I encourage you to sign up for that and to participate, learn what we've done for the year, and then let's take this and move it forward.
Thank you. Michael, there are a few questions here about transportation. One from Hillary about transportation, the largest contributor of greenhouse gas emissions. And we know that simply electrifying public fleets and getting individuals to purchase electric vehicles isn't enough. What is CEC's plan to work on promoting use of and investment in public transportation? And then there's another question from Deborah just about electric vehicles. So those are two different strategies for tackling the transportation sector. Do you want to address those?
Yes, Hillary, I totally agree with you. We can't just move to more efficient vehicles and alternative fuels. One of the most important things that we need to do is to reduce the amount of driving that we do. And CEC mostly works on more policy items, in general plans and transportation plans, SBCAG work to really figure out how to redesign our cities so that we can make driving a choice, not a necessity. So it's a very long and complex process to totally redesign our cities, but we're definitely up to the task and are always commenting and engaging on different planning activities. We also have worked with Traffic Solutions and constantly working with Santa Barbara Bicycle Coalition and Coast to advocate for alternatives to driving alone, along with MTD. We realize though that because of how our cities are built up, that a lot of people want other people to ride transit and are not willing to do alternatives to driving alone. So we take a very pragmatic approach and also realize that not a lot of groups were working on electric transportation. So over the last 10 years, we've really led work on electric vehicles. And to get to Deborah's question, I put a link in the chat about a webinar that we put together a few months ago. If you could go to electricdrive805.org or follow that link and watch the webinar. And we also have our 8 steps to a free or low-cost electric vehicle. Most people that live, that have a family of 4 making under $104,000, so low to moderate income, could actually lease an electric vehicle for free or very low cost. Some of our staff have been doing that, as well as some of the other people that we know in the community. So there's a lot of information there. And then for people that have higher incomes, electric vehicles are very affordable, as you'll see in that webinar and all the information on Electric Drive 805.
And there's another webinar coming up here in a few weeks on, it's a clinic on electric vehicles, yes?
Yeah, stay tuned for an updated webinar actually in 3 weeks on March 23rd at noon. And there's a sign up on Electric Drive 805 events if you want to sign up for that webinar. Looks like
And
it's
that
getting
one,
posted in the
will
chat.
actually be bilingual. So just definitely want to make sure people know about that one.
Sigrid, I'll just also point out, because I mean, in case you haven't gotten your webinar fix, there's plenty to do this week. And so I want to point out that we are partnering with the city of Santa Barbara, and tomorrow at 11, and then again on Sunday, there will be a brainstorming session, idea generation session that's kind of similar to what we did with the resilience roundtables, but really focused on their climate action planning. And so they'll be looking at areas of energy, waste, and transportation. So it ties into to how somebody can get involved and get those ideas out. And so I hope you will participate. We'll put a link in for that one as well. So again, that one tomorrow at 11, and again on Sunday.
We have so many great questions, and I know we're not going to be able to get through all of them. And but I do want to take a moment just to talk about healthy soils and you know, what we can each personally do to work with nature and sequester carbon. So Allegra, there's a question in here specifically around that. Is there, from Hugh Kelly, is there a scope for a soil-wise gardening program?
Ooh, that's a great idea. I guess there are a couple things. I would just encourage folks to think more about the organic waste that you interact with, whether it's food waste or green waste coming from your garden or your neighbors. All of that is a resource, and we need to be better as a community and globally about reclaiming that as a resource and making sure the carbon that's in it is put back in our soil, back in our land where it can do some good. If you want to learn more about kind of resilient land management and soil building land management, Santa Barbara City College Horticulture Department has a variety of classes that are very affordable where you can learn more about this. There are other community gardens that put on workshops. We can link to those in the chat at some point. So I don't know if that answers your question, Hugh, but I'd love to talk more offline about that with you.
Thank you. All right. Michael, I'm going to throw another one at you that is around solar panels being installed on campuses at Santa Barbara Unified. And the question is really about, will the students be learning about the solar panels? I would imagine the answer to that is yes, but maybe you could just alert folks to what is happening with the schools.
Yeah, so I'm not sure about the exact lesson planning that will happen, but I'm sure the creative teachers we have at Santa Barbara Unified will work some of the solar panel lessons into their lessons. But CEC has been advocating for many years now for Santa Barbara Unified. I'd really like to call out our former board president, Laura Capps, for her advocacy on the board as well. And so we've had a lot of meetings over the years with Santa Barbara Unified, and they finally moved forward and just recently awarded a proposal to a couple organizations that are working together to build solar at most of the schools at Santa Barbara Unified, and then 6 solar microgrids that will be able to have battery storage incorporated. So this is a really great success for Santa Barbara Unified, and we expect to see more and more schools going solar.
Fantastic. Great.
Sigrid, I'm sorry, I have one more thing to point out. The County of Santa Barbara does have discounted composting bins. So if you're interested in managing your own food waste, there are a lot of options for residents. And Hillary in the chat, I saw she mentioned worm composting. So there are a lot of really creative ways that you can compost at home.
Fantastic. Okay, I think we are getting close to the end of our hour. Any final thoughts from any of our panelists? Anything that you didn't get a chance to share that you would like to? Okay, very good. Well, we have a number of questions that we weren't able to get to. We will do so as we wrap up the event here. I want to let you know that we're going to take some of these questions and answer them in our follow-up e-blast that will go out. Again, there will be a link to the video for today, as well as some of the other resources that we shared. There's a lot of really important work happening right now. CECs shared some of the work that we're focused on, but as you've been seeing in the chat section, both the city and the county of Santa Barbara are doing their updates to their climate action planning. So right now really is the time to get involved with that. Some really interesting creative thoughts that people were throwing out. And I would really encourage you to participate in some of the idea generation and visioning that Sharon and others have been talking about today. So I think the city of Santa Barbara has got one session tomorrow. So with that, I am going to thank my team. Fantastic job with the panel. Naira, thank you for interpreting. Behind the scenes, Iris, Alan, Kathy, thank you all. I think we're going to close. All right, thank you. Have a great afternoon, everyone.